Welcome. My name is Chris Jonkhoff. I'm a funeral director here at the Reynolds-Jonkhoff Funeral Home. Thank you on behalf of Ralph's family for coming today to celebrate his awesome life. We have a very special service today planned by Harriet and his sons, and we will begin with the song What a Wonderful World. If you have a phone or a pager or anything that could make noise, if you could just turn those off to make sure we don't disrupt our services today. So thank you all very, very much for coming.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I never knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Good afternoon. For those of you that I haven't met, my name is Pete LaPlaca, and I am very honored that Harriet asked me to lead the eulogy today for Ralph. I told her I don't do sad, so we both instantly agreed that we will try to make this event a celebration of a life well lived, rather than a sad array. A central theme you will learn today is that Ralph loved to talk, and he would have enjoyed this party in his honor. I met Ralph through Harriet about 7 years ago, and we became good friends through our work with the acting group, as well as other events I talked him into over the years, in both volunteer and social gatherings. In reflection, I would call Ralph a gentle giant, not from a physical standpoint for sure, but from an intellectual standpoint. He was one of the best educated people I have ever met. In all of our intense discussions over the years, he was always soft-spoken and rational, and never had to raise his voice to make a point, as I was prone to do. For the formal part of the eulogy, I would like to read a poem called The Dash by Linda Ellis. I've read it many times, and it'll add a special perspective to Ralph's passing. It has been read millions of times around the world in many different languages. And the amazing thing was that Linda wrote this in about 45 minutes and never expected it to go anywhere, and it's just unbelievable. So listen carefully if you would. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted first came the date of the birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between the years. For that dash represents all the time that they spent life on earth, and now only those who love them know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. So think about this long and hard. Are there things you'd like to change? For you never know how much time is left that can still be rearranged. If we could just slow down enough to consider what's true and real and always try to understand the way other people feel. Be less quick to anger and show appreciation more and love the people in our lives like we've never loved before. If we treat each other with respect and more often wear a smile, remembering that this special dash might only last a little while. So when your eulogy is being read with your life's actions to rehash, would you be proud of the things they say about how you spent your dash? This has special significance for me. My wife predeceased me a number of years ago, and we have a beautiful crypt at Oakwood Cemetery, about 10 feet off the ground. It's got her name, her birth date, and the date of her passing. What I didn't know is they had my name over here, my birth date, and a dash. So every time I go there, it's like a punch in the gut, and you have to think about it. But it's very, very well done. So there had to be a religious component today. And I learned very recently, after all my hours of discussions with Ralph, that he was born Jewish, and I didn't know that. Now, he was not a religious man, but he was born into a Jewish family, and he received religious training in Judaism in his younger days. Ironically, this past Friday, I was on a bike ride with a whole bunch of folks, and a Jewish professor buddy came up to me before the ride, and he introduced me to a visiting friend from Austin, Texas, named Jonathan. And Jonathan had a very Jewish name, like Rabinowitz. And so I didn't even think of it at that time. After the ride, I saw them again. They were parked right across from me. And I told them that I was participating in a Jewish funeral today, and I was trying to select an appropriate prayer. Jonathan told me he was a retired rabbi. I couldn't believe it. I told the men of the 3 prayers I was considering, and they approved of my primary choice that I will read in a minute. Then Jonathan quipped in. He said, "Don't worry, I presided over hundreds of Jewish funerals. It's a gathering where everyone lies profusely about what a great person that passed away, and then they party for 3 days." So I thought that was unique. A little bit of background. The poem is called El Mala Rakaman, which translates to the God full of compassion. Indeed, this prayer is a call to God's compassionate nature. In Jewish thought, souls go to paradise after death, and this prayer pleads with God to give them rest and contentment in the next world. Asking God to have mercy is a tradition in the Jewish faith. It's been translated into English, and I'll give it a try. God, full of mercy, who dwells in the heights, provide a sure rest upon the divine presence wings within the range of the holy, pure, and glorious, whose shining resemble the skies, to the soul of Ralph Anthony Mittelberger, son of Frank Mittelberger, for a charity was given to the memory of his soul. Therefore, the Master of Mercy will protect him forever from behind the hiding of his wings, and will tie his soul with the rope of life. The everlasting is his heritage, and he shall rest peacefully upon his lying place. And let us say, Amen. As you probably all know, Ralph was a lawyer and a partner in a law firm. And he was part of our group, our theatrical group. And we couldn't afford a lawyer or legal advice. But Ralph was always willing to help. So I titled him as an auxiliary member of our board. And I called him Pro Bono Consigliere. And he loved the title. And to lighten things up and set the stage for our primary speakers, Ralph was always looking for ways to volunteer and to help out. And what I learned a couple of years ago was Harriet was an old farm girl. She grew up on a farm. And we have a place in Interlaken. It's got a campsite and a fire pit, and it's on the water. And Harriet liked to do weenie roasts. So we did a couple of weenie roasts. And one of last year, we're sitting around a campfire. Any of you ever been to a campfire? You know that the wind changes and the smoke goes this way and that way, whatever. And we're eating our plates, and Ralph and I were talking this way, and the ladies were on the other side. And so I look up from my plate, and Ralph and I were carrying on a conversation, him doing most of the talking as usual. And Ralph is covered in smoke. I mean, all I could see was his eyeglasses and his hand waving around for emphasis. And it was like something out of a horror movie. And I wish I would have had a camera there. But he was oblivious. He was so into what he was saying. As usual, it was hilarious. And then with our theatrical troupe, I usually make cookies, and we serve cookies and lemonade or water at intermission. And Ralph again was volunteering. So I said, okay, Ralph, you can handle the kitchen. I've got other things to do. So I set it all up with the cookies, the lemonade already poured. And I said, all you have to do is ask people what they want and make sure they get them. 3 or 4 minutes later, I come walking through, and there's a lineup all the way across. And so I go in there, and typical Ralph. Hi, how are you? What's your name? Where are you from? And he did that all the time. And so I had to open up the side window and serve cookies out of there to get people cleared out. And I've got dozens of stories just like that, but Ralph and I had some very intense conversations. And I always try to stump him, but I found out he read 3 newspapers online every day, national newspapers. So he was very, very educated, very well read, and I'll miss him. So from here on, rather than me babble on, our speakers coming up will be Harriet first, then Dr. Danny Mittelberger coming second, and then Dr. Peter coming third. And then fourth, we have some folks that just came in from Washington, D.C. Marcia and her husband, Jim, that have known Ralph for many, many years. Their last name is Sundin, and Marcia actually worked with Ralph. So without further ado, I will call my very good friend, Harriet.
Well, I will try to do this. I'm going to start by talking about how we met. It was a blind date, and I didn't want to date anymore. I'd been divorced for a number of years. I said, I'll go for the dinner. The next day, Ralph was working on Saturday like he often did, and he called me up and he said, do you want to get together? And I said, sure. And I gave him directions to my house. He got lost. He blamed me. I blamed him. He finally arrived, and we took Peter, who was then 8, to a park, and he was chasing Peter around. Peter at one point ran by me and said, Mom, it's about time. And from then on, we were a couple, and then married, and then had our son, Dan. What I want to say about him was that, yes, he was very smart, as Pete said, and quite an intellectual, and maybe a genius. I don't know, really, really smart. But what he loved, besides his family, was being a lawyer. He loved it. He loved it. He was so sorry that he retired early, whereas everybody else wants to retire early. He didn't. He would have liked to have gone on working as long until he died. He loved it. And we went to a reunion at MIT, which for those of you that don't know it is really an engineering school primarily. And he worked as an engineer for a couple of years and hated it before he went to law school. And everybody at the reunion said, if you had asked us way back then, we would have told you he was going to be a lawyer. He loved to travel. Because of his work, he went everywhere in Europe. He went everywhere in the Far East, and we went to Israel. And his favorite trip was one that may be spoken about a bit later, was Siberia. And most people would say, including me, I'm not going. But he went with Jim Sundin and Jim's son Kevin and our son Danny. And they had, and some other people. And they went up the Lena River, and it was quite a diverse group. There was a Russian group, there was a German group, and then the outsiders, of which the Americans were part of. And he never forgot that trip. He said it was the best trip of his life because it was so different. And I looked at the pictures and said, nope, not me. Nope, not gonna do it. He also loved his boat. We had a boat on the Chesapeake, and he loved going out in that boat, going across the bay and getting crabs. We would get crabs at various places, and sometimes we would fish for crabs. My kids are smiling at me because of some of the boating misadventures we had, but he loved it. He was a great husband. He always supported me and our family. He had great integrity. He's the only person almost that I trusted implicitly with everything. And his death was really sudden, but he didn't suffer very long. We had no idea how quickly it was going to go. And my son Peter, who's a doctor, and Jim Sundin, who's a doctor, and Jim Mittelberger, who's a doctor in California, and all the Mayo doctors were all consulting each other about what was going on with him, and it was just too much at once. They couldn't do surgery because they couldn't get his kidneys back, and after surgery would have been cancer treatments. So he went quickly, and that was the best thing. I know he is at peace, but I am heartbroken. And I will really miss him forever.
You ready, Dan?
I think the eulogies are supposed to be about the person who's passed, but this one's more about what my dad meant to me and our relationship. Because my dad was my role model, and I got a lot of the most important parts of myself from him. He had great integrity, which my mom mentions. I got my sense of right and wrong from him, and for better or worse, I got my sense of humor from him. You all laugh, so you know what I mean. As probably everyone here knows, he loved to argue for the sake of argument. But no matter how heated the argument got, it was always intellectual and never personal. That ability to argue passionately, but separate the argument from the people arguing, is what made him such a great attorney. And I think I got that from him too. But I think the most important thing that he taught me was to always try to improve yourself. My dad did not have an easy childhood, and he made it his goal as a parent to be better than his dad was. He succeeded, and I am the man I am today because of him. I have taken the lessons and values he gave me, and I will continue to apply them and improve on them. He always said he was proud of me, and knowing who he was and what he valued, that is quite a compliment. I love you, Dad, and I miss you, and I will always try to do what will make you proud.
For those of you who don't know me, my name's Peter Davis. Ralph was my stepfather. Treated me like a son. Chased me around parks when I was a little kid. And we just had so many great memories together. Fished in a lot of ponds. I think I got my work ethic from him, and he never had to say a word. He was really selfless. And I knew he worked a lot, and he worked really hard. He always made time for family. And I just absorbed that. And I agree with my brother. I wouldn't be the person I am today if it wasn't for him. He had a great influence. He was. I hate that you guys stole my thunder. I mean, I can't say the word integrity because you've said integrity now twice in two different speeches, but I mean, he had amazing integrity. I mean, he really did. And he was a great family man. He gave us love, and you knew he had our back all the time. And that was it was fantastic. A great marriage, 40-year marriage, except when they were in the car together trying to figure out directions. It's the only time. It's the only time it wasn't good. The rest of the time it was fantastic. He had, from doing these things as a kid with him, we did lots of trips. In Maryland, we went to all these hikes and all these places where Civil War battles had been, and Old Town Williamsburg and these great places. And I think he really liked history, but he didn't want to sleep in the historical bed that was from like 1700. And so they went to these places, like these bed and breakfasts where everything was, from like the 1800s, which he didn't like. And he had a wry sense of humor. I remember you telling me a story about when he went to Italy, and I can't remember what city it was, but you're looking at like Roman ruins, and he's like, why don't they slap some paint on this place? Right? That's the kind of guy he was. It was just hilarious. I thought it was hilarious. And I guess as certain, when I became adult, then we debated everything. We debated everything, and it became part of our tradition. Current events, whatever. I wouldn't call it an argument, but it was just debates. Just became part of our family, and that was fantastic. Little snippets popped in. I realized when I was getting ready today, like he's actually the one that taught me how to tie a tie. I think he taught Danny a little bit better, though, because mine pulls to the left. We had, he introduced me. He loved it up here. I love it up here, too. He loved it up here and introduced me to some, he cared about his family. He cared about other people, and he volunteered for a lot of stuff. He introduced me. I know some of the guys are here. There's a place called Nolan's. A great group of people, just a great group of people. And it's the kind of place you could be a stranger. He said, you could be a stranger. You can sit down at a table with a whole group of guys. It's just like you've been there. And then he'd start arguing with them, too, just like he did with everybody else. And over the years, I think they came to appreciate that, and they became good friends. It was really special. I know some of them are here today. It was really special. We came to, like, it's the little things. I was thinking about, I never thought about the tie thing until today. We shared a love of military history. We would debate that all the time. He and I, for some reason, were always the ones, we'd have a new shirt on and go out to dinner and spill something on it, like just uniformly. And I didn't feel bad because it was just me. It was him, too. We both did it. It was like we just went it together. We always spilled stuff on our shirt. We both love pie. And the pie up here is really good. So, and I don't know how it works in other families, but it's very possible in my family that you could be at the refrigerator at 2 in the morning, and it's like a family reunion because everybody is circling all night. So there are many nights that Ralph and I had a piece of pie at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and little things like that were fun. I just want to say, thank you for being here. And I know some of you traveled great distances to be here, and that was actually a physical hardship to do. But I know my stepfather would be honored that you were here, so thank you. Thank you. I'm going to miss him too. I'm going to miss his wry sense of humor. I'm going to miss all of that. It was a hectic time when he died, and I was working 6 hours away, and it's not the kind of job I can just leave if there's nobody to. I'm an emergency physician, and my brother Dan was down, and I didn't make it back in time. He died the day I was trying to get home. But there were no words left unsaid. I told him I loved him all the time. He knew, and he had family there to hold his hand. I'm glad he didn't suffer. So I love him too. We all love him. I'll miss him. I'll miss his sense of humor. Thank you. Thank you for being here. It's a real honor. You're really honoring him. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter. One thing I failed to mention, after our next speakers finish, we're going to have a military presentation of the flag to Harriet and the family. It'll only take a few minutes, but we have 3 or 4 Navy representatives here today, and Ralph was in the Navy. So that'll come on after Marcia and Jim.
Go ahead, Counselor.
And we've known Ralph for 35 plus years. It's hard to remember how long we've known him. Ralph and I are attorneys. Ralph was my boss at the U.S. International Trade Commission, where we did litigation, and he was a lot more experienced than me. When I started working there, I looked up to Ralph. He had been at the Department of Justice, and now he was a supervisor, and I was a very junior attorney just trying to learn litigation. So I looked up to Ralph, and he guided me. One of my first cases that I was assigned was before a crusty old judge who probably didn't think that much of female attorneys either. But I had Ralph at my side, and just before the trial, the judge made a decision on whether evidence should be submitted that we clearly thought was wrong. It was against the rules, and it would affect the case. And Ralph said, "You've got to tell the judge he made a mistake." And I said, "You want me to go up there and tell this guy who's 34 years thinks he knows everything that he was wrong?" He goes, "Yeah, you got to do it." So I get up there. I was nervous. I was scared. Ralph was sitting behind at the table, and I said, "Your Honor, you made a mistake. You need to reconsider." I didn't even finish the argument, and the judge goes, "Who do you think you are? You're just a government attorney telling me I made a mistake. I'm the judge. I make the rules. I do what I want." And I looked at Ralph, and I sat down. The judge didn't change his mind. Afterwards, Ralph and I talked about it, and he said, "You've got to do what you think is right. You've got to stand up there, argue what's correct, and you can't be afraid, and you just have to do what's right, and you can't take it personally." For years, Ralph and I joked about that the way the judge just lit into me, and I did what was right. I made the right arguments, and Ralph supported me. And that lesson I learned for the many years after that. I litigated, and I learned a lot from Ralph. And I'm really grateful for all the time I've spent learning from him and working with him. And it's invaluable. And we became very close family friends after that. And I really appreciate everything Ralph and his family did for me and my family. And I'm very grateful that my career was as successful as it was. A lot of it was due to Ralph. And my husband's going to say a few words about some of our family times with Ralph and his family.
Well, those who know me know it's going to be hard just for me to say a few words about Ralph. There's a lot of stories. Let me just start out by saying Ralph had a nickname that was between our families, and it sounds like there were other people that had nicknames for him. And that nickname was created by Danny. Our kids were hanging out with him. We were together, probably at a dinner at your house or our house. And Danny, you were getting ready to go on to Berkeley, and Danny's a genius, okay? In my opinion, and my kids' opinions. And they were saying to Danny, "Well, we know you're going to do something really, really great. When you go to Berkeley, you're going to probably, make the discovery of a new element." And Danny's like, "Well, I don't know, maybe I'll do my best." And And they said, well, if you do, what would you name it? And he said, well, because my dad paid for my college, I would have to honor him with the name of the element, and we would call it Ralphium. And so from then on, everyone in our family, when they talked to Ralph, it was Ralphium. There was
And
a
we're
si-
still waiting for Dan to come up with it.
We had a lot of fun as a family, and I'll just talk a little bit about some of the hunting experiences. I don't know how many of you knew that Ralph was actually a pretty avid hunter, and Harriet bought him a Weatherby 300 at my recommendation. I said, well, you got to use it. So we went on a caribou hunt out in Upper Quebec. Now, Ralph is a kid from Jersey. This is wild here, but if you think it's wild here, go to Upper Quebec, fly into a camp. There's nothing but, using GPS to try to find your way back to the camp. And we had a ball. And so when we were hunting one of the days, we heard a couple of gunshots. We knew they were coming from Ralph's direction, so we went over there to figure he had made a kill on a caribou. And Ralph comes wandering out, and he is bloody. And we're like, what happened? And he says, well, I think when I was shooting the gun, it came back and got me with the scope and my glasses. And so he had, the glasses kind of, damaged his nose a bit and gave him a bloody nose. And he says, but I got a caribou. And we wandered over there, and sure enough, there was a dead caribou. And I said to Ralph, I looked over about 40 yards, and I says, there's another caribou down over there. And he goes, what? I shot this one twice. And I was like, well, I think you had two caribou near each other, and when the first one went down, you thought it must not have gone down, and you shot the other one. It was perfectly, and it was perfectly legal because you could take two, so he had his two. So that was quite a bit of fun. And then, of course, there was the Russian trip. He loved, as was mentioned, to do trips, and this was the ideal trip for Ralph. We get on a riverboat. It's on the Lena River. It's exotic, to say the least. And we had an opportunity to meet people in Moscow, or not Moscow, I guess it was when we traveled there, but more importantly on the river, we met all sorts of really interesting people. And, it really was great fun because he had conversations with everybody. He was the life of the party, so to speak, on that boat. It was really a ball. So those are just a few anecdotes. I could go on for another half hour if you got the time, but no.
No, you're being pulled off.
Okay, done.
Okay.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife, I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston, and New York to LA, where there's pride in every American heart, and it's time we stand and say that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
Stay put. Good afternoon. We are your honor guard, and it's our honor to be here on this day and at this time. We volunteers represent the veterans of foreign wars, Post 2780, Traverse City, the American Legion Post 35, also in Traverse City. Today, our United States Navy Honor Guard will be here to present our nation's flag. My buglers today are Mike Hunter and David McIntosh. My name is Dan Kirkwood, and I'm a veteran from the 50s and 60s, from the Navy, of course. Today, we're here to pay our respects and to honor Lieutenant J.G. Ralph Mittelberger, United States Navy. Ralph entered service on active duty the 3rd of June, 1970. He was commissioned on that day as well as an ensign in the Navy. Ralph was assigned to the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard as a ship project engineer officer, the Philadelphia Division. His duties included specifications, reports, and all facets of naval ship operations and integrity of that said ship. Ralph also received the National Defense Service Medal for his time in service. To serve under the flag of this nation is a privileged duty of every able-bodied American. We have come here today to pay our respects to one Ralph, who had the privilege to do so. Proudly, we remember his service. It's because of men and women like Ralph that we live in a land of freedom, peace, justice. And may our ceremonies of today deepen our reverence and our respect for our loved one, our comrade, and our friend. There is a creed that the Navy has had for years and years and years, the same creed that I lived under and lived by. And the creed is today, still with our sailors today. It's called the Sailor's Creed. I am a United States sailor. I will support and I will defend the Constitution of the United States of America, and I will obey all lawful orders of those appointed over me. I respect the fighting spirit of the United States Navy and to those who have gone before me to defend freedom and democracy around the world. I proudly serve my country's Navy combat team with honor, with courage, and commitment. I am committed to excellence and the fair treatment of all. Sort of follows the golden rule. I will be professional, wearing my uniform with pride, and accepting the responsibilities for my actions. I will set excellence as my standard, and I will strive to make me a better sailor and my crew a better crew. I am a United States sailor. There's a definition of a veteran. It matters not what branch of service they were in. It matters not what their rank was or rate. Because when they entered the service, they did sign a blank check. And a blank check was simply made out to the United States of America for the sum of and up to, including their life. We believe that Ralph is now in the hands of our Heavenly Father, the Supreme Commander, and the Judge of all, who giveth his beloved sleep, that we may be comforted by the blessed assurance that Ralph, our comrade, our friend, and our loved one, is at peace in God's eternal life and peace, and abides in a place where all burdens are lifted, and there is no more sickness, and there is no more pain. So let us pledge ourselves anew and pick up the banner laid down by Ralph and continue his march to face the challenges that confront us in this life and to provide support and protection for all those left behind. And so let us live that when the keeper of eternal records shall have called our names for the last time, those we leave behind may say of us, as we now say of Ralph, here lies all that is mortal of a true-hearted comrade and a defender of country and flag. At this time, we will have a rifle salute. It will be followed by taps and a presentation of our nation's flag. We treat the playing of taps as we would our national anthem. So I would like to have you rise when I'll give you the symbol for that one in a little bit. But if you are a veteran, I would encourage you, please, render a salute for Ralph at that time. Honor Guard detail, post. Please rise. And salute. Two. Please be seated.
President of the United States, proud native and a free nation. Please suffer national anthem for Ralph's honored and faithful service to his country.
There are many traditions observed at military funerals. The folding of the flag, sounding of taps, the presentation, of course. They all have significant meanings. The rifle volleys date back to the days of the Napoleonic Wars, where a ceasefire was conducted, allowing both sides to care for their dead and properly care for their wounded. Today, after the 3 volleys you heard, we're going to place 3 of the empty shell casings in your folded flag as a reminder we're to carry on Ralph's behalf and carry us through the days we have left as well. Bill? Thank you for being here in Ralph's behalf. And the final words I would like to say in Ralph's behalf here. Ralph, have fair winds and calm seas as you make your way into eternal life. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the American Legion, the VFW, and Active Duty for being here today. I think we did a wonderful, positive, happy send-off that Ralph would be very approving of, so thank you. At this time, don't forget to turn your phones back on, that way your friends can find you. And then we will be going in procession out to the Maple Grove Cemetery in Empire. So a funeral procession, we turn on our bright lights and our emergency flashers, and this is Ralph's last parade, and we follow each other like a parade or a train. So we'll be helping you get out into your cars now for those who wish to continue on to the cemetery. Otherwise, have a good rest of your Sunday, and thank you all very, very much for coming today. We appreciate you.